All right. Yes. Thanks so much, everyone. Really thrilled with the way this is going today. It's really awesome to be a part of this group and see so much good discussion and community interaction happening. Thanks to Todd and Nathan and all the others who have eagerly and kindly answered many of the questions. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about potential opportunities for community science in this space, looking at invasive ambrosia beetles or others. So first, I want to talk about community science in general, share some approaches, and then we'll just share a little bit about how you could engage in the Forest Health Watch if you're willing. I do want to acknowledge that today, we're talking about many native oak species, particularly in Washington and Oregon, like the Garry oak or the Oregon white oak. You can see that the native range of this species, there's many tribal communities that overlap with, whose homelands overlap with the native range of this species. Today I'm speaking to you from Tacoma, which is the traditional homelands of the Puyallup tribe of Indians, which most certainly was existing and still currently stewards and exists with the Garry oak in Washington. And so just want to acknowledge that. As I mentioned, I'm coming from Tacoma. I'm based at WSU in the Puyallup Research and Extension Center, and I'm really grateful to be mentored by some incredible people, including Todd Murray, who's our center director, but also an integrated pest management specialist or a forest entomologist. So thanks, Todd. And also grateful to be working with Marianne and Garry, who are forest pathologists. We, as I acknowledged earlier, we're really thrilled because we have support to look at urban trees specifically from a generous gift from the Albert Victor Ravenholt Fund. We've established this Ravenholt Urban Forest Health Lab, where I've got a great team working with me. And Fig and Zay are kind of our research and extensions, our outreach specialists, and they've done some visiting of oak trees recently that I'll share with you in a few minutes. So community science, there's some really great summaries of kind of the approaches and the value and the opportunities. I really like this phrasal paper in Nature Reviews Methods Primers. They really highlight kind of the stages of creating a community science project, starting with identifying the problem or need. And so in this case, our problem or need may be we need further monitoring for invasive or non-native species like the Mediterranean oak borer. So in that case, we'd move to stage 2 and determine if community science is a good approach. And then if so, we can design a project and start building a community. But, thinking about, is community science a good approach? Why would we want to engage communities in this type of work? One, it's really good to have multiple people out there looking. The more eyes, the more likely we'll detect something early. We generally want to raise awareness and appreciation for healthy trees and the actions that we take to keep trees healthy. We like to learn from participants, and there's lots of opportunity for kind of two-way learning and sharing of perspectives. And so we value community science for the opportunity to learn both ways. We see it as a way to engage with communities that are actually going to be the most impacted by some of these species. We don't want to just work on things on our own and carry all that biosecurity on our shoulders, but we want to share that biosecurity responsibility with communities, and especially those that are going to be impacted. We also recognize that community science is great for monitoring invasive species specifically. We've done some reviews of different community science projects and how they fit into this biosecurity framework. So from before an organism's even introduced to our area to way after it's established and taking a toll or had an impact. So I'm going to quickly go through some of these, but I'll try and be mindful of time. So, before an organism gets here, we can raise awareness and we can build communities. We can collect baseline data. So there's a bunch of questions for Nathan about, what species are you finding in traps? how many of them are non-native versus native. We really need more data on that, just to have that baseline information before an invasive arrives. There's also opportunities to do trainings before something arrives on looking for signs and symptoms. So that's something we're eager and interested in doing. Clearly, once something's introduced, there's great value in having more people involved so that we can detect something early. And in some cases, studies have actually demonstrated like the community may take it on themselves to remove an infested tree when there isn't, funding to remove that hazard from the city or the local government or something. In addition, by having more data, you can do really neat stuff like model hotspots of disease emergence or hotspots of invasions and better spend your resources. And there's also opportunity for us to like test different methods of containment. Maybe one person wants to test, like Karen's doing different types of traps. Maybe someone else wants to test different applications of chemicals or different watering regimes or things like that for keeping trees healthy. And then finally, there's this great demonstration of people looking for a resistant material, particularly with ash species and emerald ash borer, as well as ash dieback in Europe, where there's great value in finding the trees that survive and investigating the genetics and the potential for breeding resistant species into the future. Karen also mentioned the rapid ohia death, where there's some great efforts to collect seed and conserve genetics. And so that's another great opportunity for community science in the face of these invasive species. So there's another really great study summarizing or reviewing, kind of a role of community science in keeping forests resilient to invasive species, and really does a great job emphasizing how communities can get engaged in keeping our trees and our forests resilient. The last couple minutes, I was just going to share some general approaches. One, we could create projects where anyone can participate, but we could also do more formal training and have actual trained cohorts. So you could do these trained participation. Observatory is a really great example of that in the UK, where they have 30 to 40 rigorously trained community scientists each year that are out there, in this case, inspecting an oak tree. There's opportunities to monitor what shows up on some of these tools like iNaturalist. You never know when someone's going to share a spotted mantrefly or another invasive insect. Clearly with an ambrosia beetle, they're so small, it's difficult to use a smartphone, but you can definitely map symptoms and signs. But there's great opportunity for us all to participate in this, even from our own computers. Someone might be adding an oak tree, and you might notice that it has the classic symptom of a mob infestation, some branch dieback, and so you might comment on that observation or add the observation to a different project. There's a lot of different benefits from participating, even from that curation stage. From your computer, you can help identify symptoms and raise awareness about invasive species like the Mediterranean oak borer. So there's a lot of different approaches, specifically with monitoring for beetles. Karen showed she's testing some different kind of DIY traps. And so there's opportunities to do this where you use a 2-liter Coke bottle or a water bottle, and you create these traps yourselves. And then there's also opportunities to monitor and map the symptoms. So a little bit more about these DIY traps. Yuri Holker's group has done a great job. They had a project called the Backyard Bark Beetles Project for a while, where community members made these traps. Again, you just cut a 2-liter Coke bottle, you make this big hole, this big window, and then you add hand sanitizer because it has ethanol in it. You have to make sure you get the hand sanitizer with the ethanol, but in theory, that's a lure for a lot of these ambrosia beetles. And so we did this recently with the Washington Conservation Corps crew at the city of Tacoma's nursery, just kind of as a fun activity that we can do together. And we'd love to do this more. So we're hoping if this is something you're interested in, we'd love to work with you and figure out how we can do this feasibly. Because once you collect the beetles, that's the easy part in general. The harder part is identifying what the beetles are. The other opportunity is to map, symptoms or document where trees are unhealthy and dying. There's some great community programs already, like the Sound Initiative, Sound Oaks Initiative, which is mapping some trees throughout, like mapping oak habitat throughout Washington and the Puget Sound. But also they have some dead and dying trees mapped that we could go and visit. And we want to work closer with them to figure out what a feasible project could look like. We also created a project called the Oak Health Watch on iNaturalist. So you can add pictures of healthy and unhealthy oaks on there. And if it's something of concern, we can, share it with our partners or visit it ourselves. The last few slides, just pointing out that we have this program called the Forest Health Watch. We encourage you to engage with us. We'd love to grow this network of community scientists and people that we, can call on should there be a new invasive species or a project like the Oak Health Watch. So you can sign up as a community scientist, but you don't have to. You can engage in any way. But generally, we're just excited to be building a community of folks like yourselves that are concerned about the health of our trees and want to get involved and help keep trees healthy. So with that, I will turn it back to Molly and we can get back to some questions and answers.